If you're storing your precious family photos, movies, or even confidential documents in expensive cloud storage, then maybe it's time you consider getting a NAS for complete local control of all of your important data. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video on Bite of Geek. So in this video I'm going to be taking a look at a new NAS that has come onto the market. Now, I recently ran a poll on my YouTube channel asking people, do you use a NAS? And I was quite surprised by the results of it. It was quite evenly split. And I kind of thought it would be an awful lot more than that. And I guess, it's, you've got to ask the question, do people know about the benefits of a NAS? Do they even know what a NAS actually is? So what exactly is a NAS? Well, NAS stands for Network Attached Storage. In simple terms, it's a box full of drives that you connect a network cable to your home network, small office network, and you can share the data on those drives. So those drives could be hard drives, 3.5-inch hard drives. There could be SSDs. Some NAS units allow you to have NVMe drives in them as well, and you can set up all users on these NAS devices, and you can usually have apps on them as well to do certain tasks like backups and stuff like that. And it's just basically a good way to have local storage, so you're not having to transfer files up onto some kind of cloud storage, paying additional costs when you go over your allowed quota of storage space. You've got complete privacy controls on your local NAS, so you're not potentially sharing something that you don't really want to be sharing outside of your network. Now, I've been using a NAS for a number of years. I started out basically repurposing an old PC and, with the full intentions of saving costs on that, and then only really finding out that the running costs of it were getting quite expensive. So I decided to move to an off-the-shelf, brand name NAS unit, and I've used that for a number of years. And it was only recently that I decided to sell that. The company behind that brand, basically, some of the recent decisions that they've taken with regards to their products, I wasn't overly comfortable with, and I decided, enough was enough, and I would start to look back into the market to see what was now available. So full disclosure, UGREEN have gone and sent me the DXP4800 Plus NAS for me to be able to take a look at and review on the channel. They've not had any editorial input into this video, but I would like to thank the UGREEN team for considering me and sending this out in the first place. So UGREEN have gone and launched a whole range of NAS units, from 2-bay to 4-bay to 8-bay, 4-bay NVMe. These are all off the back of a successful Kickstarter campaign. There really is something for everyone in their range of products. The units have different processors in them, so probably you'd be surprised at the specification of these units. There really isn't anything else, certainly at the price point that we're talking about for these on the market at the moment. So before we get into the specification, let's just have a look at what you get in the box when your NAS arrives. So all very premium looking packaging, UGREEN branding all over it, lots of pictures and stuff like that. Opening it up, you've got a good level of protection in there to keep your NAS nice and safe. Underneath that, you've got the main NAS unit itself, and you've also got an accessories pack. Now in that pack you get a couple of Ethernet cables, you get some keys for your lockable drive bays, you get some nice big chunky thermal pads for NVMe drives if you want to put those in the NAS, and you get your power adapter. You also get a bag of screws and a screwdriver, so if you're going to use 2.5-inch SSDs or something like that within the caddies, then you'll need the screws for that. So in terms of specification then, well, this really is something quite special. So it has a 12th gen Intel Pentium Gold CPU at 4.4 gigahertz, 5 cores, 6 threads. This really is the NAS with the best processor at this price point. It's 8 gigabytes of RAM, expandable all the way up to 64 gigabytes. Connectivity more than you'll ever need on this, 10 gig, 2.5 gig, no need for optional cards here to get that high speed connectivity. You've got multiple USB ports, 10 gig USB-C, you've got an SD card slot on it. So, UGREEN really thinking about the target audience for this NAS, allowing you easy access to kind of get your data onto your NAS unit. It's got dual NVMe card slots on it as well, and as I say, it's a 4-bay NAS, which gives you capacity of up to 112 terabytes, which is absolutely staggering when you think about it. You're talking upwards of 39 million photos, depending upon your resolution that you take them in. You're just not going to have that many photos on there. Thousands and thousands of movies, store all your documents, all that kind of stuff. There's so much capacity here. You're just never going to need to pay for cloud storage again. My mobile device is telling me I've got 2 gigabytes free before I have to upgrade my cloud storage. With something like this, that is a thing of the past. I can transfer everything off that and free up the space now on my mobile phone. So setting up your DXP4800 Plus is really straightforward. So you've got 4 drive trays there, 4 caddies, and if you're going to use 3.5-inch drives, basically what you've got on the underside of the caddy, you've got this like little sliding bit, and that slides one side out. You put your drive in, align the pins in the caddy to the holes on your drive, and then slide the side back in again, and that's it. It's done. It's completely toolless, and it works perfectly. You can hang your drive upside down, it's not going to fall out, and then you just push the drive caddy back into your NAS. Now, if you're going to use something like 2.5-inch drives, maybe SSDs or something like that, then that's what the bag of screws are for, and you just attach the drives that way. But either way, it's a really straightforward process to get everything in so that you can get your NAS up and running as quickly as possible. So if we just turn over the NAS and have a look at the base of it, you'll see there's an access panel and a couple of screws taken off that, and we get inside to see that there's 2 bays for NVMe drives to go in, and there's also 2 slots for RAM as well. So this came with 8 gigabytes of Samsung RAM, and if you go on the UGREEN website, you'll see the whole list of the different manufacturers and the RAM that you can use from there. It's quite an extensive list. Same for the NVMe drives as well. I know from past experience with one of the NAS units I use, you had to use very specific RAM from a very certain manufacturer, the speed and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise the RAM just wouldn't work properly and the NAS wouldn't boot. So no such issues with that here. Now I'm going to be using 4 terabyte Western Digital NAS hard drives in this unit, and I would say if you can stretch your budget to be able to get NAS hard drives, it's always a good option. They are designed to be on 24/7 and work in close proximity to each other, so any kind of vibration and stuff like that. But having said that, I am using Western Digital hard drives. No need to have own brand certified drives or anything like that. UGREEN have a list on the website of all the drives that will work fine with this NAS, and whether that's Seagate, Iron Wolf, Western Digital, Toshiba, they're all on there. You choose what you can afford within your budget for your NAS. Now, once I've got the drives all plugged in into the NAS, it's just a case of connecting on the power and the Ethernet cable and switching it on. It starts to go through its setup process. You know, I've downloaded the UGREEN app onto my mobile phone, and you know, it's taken me through account registration, really straightforward. And you know, it is a bit familiar to me, having used a NAS before, but you know, I think this is perfect for anybody as well who's never come across this. You know, it's pretty straightforward. I did jump from the mobile app onto a web browser on the computer once I'd you know, determined the IP address of the NAS, and continue the setup there. But you know, you can carry on the mobile phone if you want to do that. So once everything's all started up, the first real stage of setting up your NAS is determining how you're going to provision the hard drives. So you know, your storage pools, you know, do you want them all together? You know, what RAID levels, so what protection you've got in case a drive fails, you know, defining that. And you know, the software has lots of explanation around what each of those different things will offer you as a user of the NAS. So I've gone for the maximum protection, so you know, if I lose a drive, my data is safe. Now, once you've decided how you're going to configure your drives, you know, it then needs to effectively provision them. You know, it needs to format them and everything. So it did kind of like say, oh, it's going to take 11 hours to go and do this. It took nowhere near that amount of time. It does take a few hours to do it though. That's no different to what I've experienced before, but you know, you can still use elements of the NAS whilst it's doing that, but I would recommend that you don't, and you just let it do its thing, because you know, you could potentially slow down the process. Go out and do some shopping or something like that whilst it does it. Now, UGREEN have designed and developed their own operating system from the ground up. It's called UGOS, and as part of the setup process, you will need to go and create a kind of like an admin account for your NAS. You should always really go and set up individual users off the back of that. You probably don't want to be using your admin account all the time. And you know, there is a lot of you know, options to configure within the NAS. So you know, you've got full user control within the operating system. So you know, if you've got a family and you want to allow them all to use the NAS, then you can set up you know, different folders for different family members, whether they've got read access or write access or something like that. You know, give them all the appropriate permissions. Now, I'm not going to go through the full ins and outs of UGOS. What I will say is that, you know, it is a very nice operating system for you know, a company that's not done one before on a NAS unit. You know, it is very quick. It looks lovely, and compared to what I've been used to before, I would say it got at least 99% of the functionality that I have previously used. The only thing that's really missing, I would say, would be the kind of like the software that was on my other NAS, which was to do with security cameras. But you know, with UGOS, you can install Docker, and you can install other software, you know, that can handle security cameras, you know, so it's no great loss at the end of the day. But you know, there is a lot of control in this, so you get kind of like a control panel, a little bit like you do in Windows, and you know, that's where you set up, or you know, all your configuration and things like that. So you know, you've got you know, your remote access, so you've got SSH and Telnet and FTP. You know, maybe you've got cameras which you know, they don't support things like ONVIF and stuff like that. So, you know, they can only transmit via FTP, where you can set that up here. You've got, you know, if you want the remote access to your NAS, so, you know, really have it as a, you know, full-on cloud experience. You know, maybe you're out with friends and you want to show them your photos from your latest holiday, then you've got a thing called UGREEN Link, and you can connect in via that. If you want to connect on a UPS, you've got all of that capability as well. You know, if you want to fine tune, you know, the hard drives and the sleeping and the fan control, all of those kinds of things. So you know, maybe you got your NAS in you know, a lounge or something like that, and you don't really want it to be overly noisy, then you've got that kind of control as well. And as is something that should always be in a NAS operating system, you know, you've got things like firewall controls in there as well. Now, on top of that, you've also got the App Center, and there's a whole range of apps here. Not as exhaustive as I have seen elsewhere, but a good first effort from UGREEN. So, you know, you've got backups, you've got Home Assistant on here. If you want to set up Home Assistant, that's there for. So for those of you, you know, who watch the channel for Home Assistant content, you know, this is an option here. You know, you've got music players, you've got photo albums, which I'll touch on in a minute. You know, you've got, you know, if you want to use it for streaming media, you know, movies, then you've got Jellyfin. And, you know, maybe if you don't use Jellyfin and, you know, you want to use Plex, well, you can set up a container via Docker to install Plex there. Now, one of the main functions of a NAS is the ability to transfer files to and from it. And, you know, as I mentioned in the specification, the DXP4800 Plus has 2.5 and 10 gigabit Ethernet. Now, my switch only has 1 gig and 10 gig Ethernet. So you're going to see a transfer of one of the files that I use for my videos, which, you know, they're all 4K footage, and, you know, they're all kind of like upwards of 1 gig. And, you know, transferring at 1 gig, you know, it is very much where you would expect it to be, nice and quick. Now, you know, if you're going to replace your cloud storage, you know, and you're transferring a file of that size, it takes minutes to do it. It is so slow. You know, you're not going to be doing large files uploading to your cloud storage, and they're going to sit on things like your mobile phone and your tablets and stuff like that, eating away at that precious storage that you've got on device. Now, if you're going to use a 10 gig connection, then just to show you the performance of that, and it is absolutely fantastic. It is super fast. So, you know, if you're a content creator and you've got these large files, then absolutely, you know, if you've got the ability to use 10 gig, use the 10 gig on the back of the NAS. Now, in a family household, if you're kind of like putting all your photos together so everybody can see everybody's photos, things can get messy really quickly. You know, it's going to be difficult to kind of like find the photos that you want to do. Now, the UGREEN NAS has a really nice photo app on it. So, you know, I've uploaded some photos from, you know, my selection that I've got hanging around the place. And what this app has is it has AI functionality. Now, it's not turned on by default, and a good example of the separation of you know, access privileges on the NAS. You know, when I've logged on my normal user, you know, I couldn't turn this on, but when I went in on my NAS admin, then I could turn on the AI image recognition functionality. Now, you can set this up to have people, you know, text, objects, you name it. You know, there's a whole bunch of them. And if you've got enough of the photos of a certain type, you can do your own model training as well. So, you know, really, really clever stuff. I've turned it on. I've gone back into my normal user, and then, you know, you can see, you know, searching for, you know, a penguin, you know, searching for a boat, searching for a drink, you know, really, really pretty quickly, you know, it's coming up with images that match that description that I'm putting in. So, you know, if you've got a huge pool of images, yes, okay, you know, it might take a little while to go and process them all, but it makes it such an easy process to go and find those images on your NAS. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the video, you know, if you're sharing confidential documents with, you know, like cloud providers and stuff like that, you've got to make sure that they have all the right security in place to make sure that somebody doesn't, you know, come across your documents and gain access to it and stuff like that. And this is where a NAS comes into its own, really. And the UGREEN NAS has two international security certifications, and that's all part of the security manager that it's got in the NAS, you know, to keep your data safe and out of somebody else's hands. Now, with my previous NAS, I never really used the mobile apps at all. They were very clunky, and I always ended up using the web interface to be able to administer the NAS itself. UGREEN have taken a different approach on this. The mobile app is every bit as good as the web interface. You really can do an awful lot with the mobile app. I'm super impressed. What they've done here is they've made it really easy to transition between the web interface and the mobile app. Things are called the same, they're in the same kind of sections, you can do the same kind of functionality. It's just second nature when you're working between the two of them, and I really like that. And UGREEN really need to have recognition for actually, from the outset, having a really good mobile app. Now, I've been using the DXP4800 Plus for a little while now, and I have to hold my hands up. I'm really impressed with this. This part of the video is always the pros and cons of a device. I'm not sure I have much in the way of cons to give you, to be honest. Let's start at the top on this. It is well built. It feels solid. It feels like a quality device. It's got a good weight to it, even without the hard drives. You put the hard drives in, this thing isn't going to go rattling across your desk when they're in use. This is a hefty device once it's all filled up. It really does shout, I was worth the money that you paid for this. The specification of this unit is just far beyond everything else. Gone are the days of Intel Atoms and Celerons for your NAS. You've got a 4.4 gigahertz Pentium Gold CPU in this. This thing is more than just storing photos and movies. This wants to be so much more. It's got a 4K HDMI port on the back of it, so if you want to connect this up and play your movies on it, you can do that. All the connectivity that you've got on it, it's just incredible. You're not going to have to buy the NAS and then pay out more money to get a better NAS, because you've already got the best NAS you can get for the money. That's the thing here. The software, UGOS, hats off to UGREEN for coming up with a good operating system. I know when it was going through its Kickstarter campaign, there were lots of things that people had to say about it, and UGREEN have really improved upon that. And for me, with the functionality that I use it for, and probably what the majority of people would use a NAS for, everything is pretty much there that you would need. You can set up your folders, your access permissions, you've got apps on there, and if the app isn't there, you've got Docker and you can put apps on via Docker. So it is there. It's a really good effort for an operating system, for a first operating system at that. Whilst this is a 4-bay NAS, UGREEN have something in their entire range for everyone: 2-bay, 4-bay, 8-bay, 4-bay NVMe NAS as well. If you want super fast performance as well as being quiet, it's all there. Some of the NASs have different CPUs on them as well, so you can have lesser or greater performance. It's all catered around the best bang for your buck, as it were. If you're interested in a NAS, in particular this one, then these UGREEN NASs, the DXP4800 Plus, etc. They're all available on Amazon, as well as the UGREEN website. I'll put links down below in the description, if you want to pick one of those up. If you've been on the fence, then I would seriously take a look at it. They've got a discount running at the moment with quite a saving on those, so now might well be the time to go and do that, so check that out. But I'd love to know your thoughts about this NAS. Are you, given the circumstances with some of the other NAS units on the market, what's happening there and people's concerns, are you thinking of moving away to another brand? Let me know down below in the comments. Have you already moved to a UGREEN NAS? How's that been working for you? Let everyone know in the comments. But if you've enjoyed the video, then don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.